I'm right behind you. 1 second. Jasmine Gigenti, if you're in the room, could you please make your way down towards the stage? Jasmine, if you're around and you can hear me, please come to the stage.
to be an easy life. That's not the way it is. So implementing irrigation, a better system, quicker way to get over the ground, a little bit more flooding. We also introduce a slow release fertiliser, so the nutrients don't get washed away to the Great Barrier Reef, stay in the ground, they don't move as much, and we notice an increase in productivity.
Oh, it's sort of what I've always wanted to do when I grew up. I've worked outside for a lot of years and then owned my own farm and then eventually moved back here with Dad. He's fairly old school, but yeah, once he sees the proof, he's quite happy to accept it. He was always a dunder person. I went back to granules to that in about 2009, and that sort of increased our yield a lot. Using different chemicals, a lot less cultivation, GPS, and then when the nitrate inhibited fertilisers come on board, I changed to them, and sort of haven't changed back.
Fertiliser plays a big part. We are using a stool splitter and it's being covered up straight away. Nutrients are there for the plant for several months. So what we notice is the plant stays healthier for longer. The cane doesn't yellow off as fast and the plant is not getting the fertiliser all in one hit. When we're using alternative fertilisers, we were growing about 9,000 tonne, and we've increased that to 12,000 tonne.
The crop seems to just keep growing throughout the year. 2 years ago we had good rain exactly when we wanted it, and it was incredible. It was a record crop. I think we cut 21,500 tonne and left 3,500 tonne standover. We used the side dress, and in about 2011 I convinced the old fellow we'd go and get a stool splitter, and as far as I'm concerned, that's the ultimate. It puts the fertiliser a good 100 mil underground in the stool, seals it off. Yeah, job done. Years ago when they were using granules, they'd wait till end of the year and then put it on. Really, I sort of try to follow the harvest around. As soon as it's cut, fertiliser goes on. And yeah, when it needs water, we give it water.
This year we're going to do fallow crops. We will then plough that into the ground, try and achieve a bit of nitrogen with it, so then we can reduce our on-farm fertiliser as well when we go to plant new cane.
I've got some K-Tech over there I'm going to try this year to see what it does, just do a trial with it, where we reduce the nitrogen, just put it on top, and it doesn't come into your nitrogen budget. Yeah, we've been looking into going to adding organic compost to the mix, just to increase organic carbon in the soil, increase water retention. We're putting it on at 500 kilo per hectare, you're only looking at a couple $100, so it's not a great outlay. And they recommend it'll last this crop cycle.
We employ our agronomists for soil testing. They keep you up to date on all the regulations to see if we are within the guidelines. If we've got any question on chemical or fertiliser, they do a fair bit behind the scene. Yeah, so Nutrien have helped us out. No end there, that's for sure.
Oh, every year we get soil samples of our fallow crops. We've got a lot of different soils in the place, and a lot of our country needs lime. And one paddock you'll have good soil up one end, in the middle you'll have clay, up the other end it'll have black soil. The agronomist gives us all their recommendations and we go from there. It's always good to have someone to call on, ask questions, bring new ideas. Definitely, yeah, try anything sort of thing.
Every day is a challenge. It's weather plays a big part. Yeah, there's way too much. But it's just a nice lifestyle. You can see what you're growing every day. There's a challenge there, and I'm up for the challenge.
I think a big round of applause again for Liquiforce. Come on, for sponsoring Morning Tea. Thank you very much, Liquiforce. Folks, we've got an hour-long presentation this time. We've got three different presenters from Mackay, Burdekin and the wet tropics regions. For a start, our next presenters are going to share with us the knowledge and data of traditional granulated phosphate fertilisers versus next generation high efficiency phosphate fertilisers, and also some nutrient management plans as well. You can find more on this presentation on page 17 plus in the magazine as well. But right now, would you please welcome to the stage Audra Allen. We're going to have Steve Vella coming up very soon, and Richard Gleb. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Audra. Either that one or the other one, take your pick, mate.
Is this my clicker?
Yeah.
Can we run the video, please?
Yeah, good morning. My name's Richard Gaia. We've got a family business with operations in Mackay and the Burdekin. We grow approximately about 1,500 hectares, thereabouts. Yeah, we've got a whole myriad of soils ranging from sodic soils right through to crasnosum soils up there at Pinnacle, and right down to nice alluvial soils on the creek flats. You've probably heard a fair bit about Project Catalyst, but where it assisted us is that it helped us get going with our nutrient management plans. We started in late 2020 for the 21 season, and well, we probably set Audra a very hard task, because everything that we do from a compliance side of things always has got the extra proviso, is that it's got to provide value to our business. And to date, I believe, we're still learning. Every farm is different. What works for us may not work on your farms, but we've learnt a lot. We had some serious reservations about nutrient use. Some of them we've still got some doubts, but overall I think the plan, as we've developed them with Audra, are working very well. I don't like being part of things where it's just feel good thing. It's got to be of value, and it's got to be a win-win for everyone. Our main concern going forward is phosphorus, and some of the sentinel crops or varieties that we have. They seem to show up very quickly if there's a phosphorus deficiency there. And the challenge is when we get into year 2, 3, 4 of the plan to keep growing the tonnes that we are. The other concern we had was that we had so many mixes of fertiliser initially, until we managed to do some more soil testing. We do a lot more soil testing than what's required, and leaf tests too. And from that, I think we're seeing the results. If we just did the basic approach, I'd have some serious concerns, because it really does come down to how well you've got your blocks mapped. We use yield mapping as well to try and nail down a representative sample of soil tests of what's in the blocks. So we don't just rely on shallow soil tests. Whilst we have reduced the amount of fertiliser we're using, we've got to be very specific on the mixes. There is a high risk there if you're not careful of employees or even yourself getting mixes mixed up in wrong paddocks. So you do really have to keep fairly good records. With any change, you normally get like a honeymoon effect for a year or two. The challenge that I see going forward is making sure that we don't go backwards. We've actually done very well with the change in policy that we've got, coupled with some better farming and irrigation techniques. For our farms, we've got some very nice soils. We've also got some challenging soils. We go all the way, as I said before, right from the red soils there at Pinnacle, right through to your sodic soils. They've got some toxicity problems in certain areas. There was a sodium chloride toxicity problem that we identified in one farm. I was very sceptical of this approach. I think it's very important that you surround yourself with very good advice. You do have to work hard at it to make it work. And we're very happy with our approach, because we're actually growing more cane and better sugar. Going forward, I think we sort of only have touched on what's in the soil. We really need to explore a lot more what's limiting yield, and with the scope of first maintaining yield and then also increasing it.
Start my presentation. So Richard joined us at the end of 2020 when legislation had brought in the NNP budgets, and he was one of the first growers to come on board. He was very proactive, being such a large grower, not only in the Burdekin but also growing in Mackay district. And he joined Project Catalyst in the Mackay practice change, a board adoption change project, and a part of that was to develop his nutrient management plans. This is a couple of the crops that he brought in. One was down Mackay. We've got Racecourse Mill in the background on the first slide, and this is up in the Burdekin on his one of his farms up in the Burdekin. So the issue with bringing in these NNP budgets was that that's exactly what it was, an NNP budget. And with Nutrien, we decided that NNP, yep, all it's doing is a calculation. It's not giving the grower really good agronomy advice. So Nutrien decided that we were going to go out and actually do something a bit more tailored towards the growers and identify any constraints and move forward. So this was part of the reason why Richard was actually keen to get on board. And as he said before, he's into doing more than just a normal soil sample. He's been doing ion mapping, he's done leaf plant tissue analysis, he does surface soil tests as well as subsoil surface soil tests. The ion mapping has actually helped us where to pinpoint to do some further soil analysis, and the little graphic one down the bottom there is actually a tailored plan to doing some broadcasting of some phosphorus prior to planting. The block showed that where the red area was, it required no phosphorus. The yellow area required about 30 kilos of phosphorus, and the bottom green area identified 20 kilos of phosphorus to the hectare. And the thing was that he actually planted east-west, not north-south. So the challenge was, how do we address the grower in regards to suitability for his phosphorus requirement for that crop? With that ion mapping and all that sort of stuff, he got a contractor in who was able to map that and go in and actually give the required areas pre-plant the phosphorus requirement for that block. So Richard's take-home message was that he was initially concerned because I had reduced his fertiliser purchase significantly. So he was concerned about less fertiliser, less crop. The other thing was that he had to trust in the science behind the decisions and trust an agronomist to be able to point him in the right direction in regards to leading him towards improving his input costs, but not sacrificing his yield and sustaining his productivity. So in the outcome, like I said, he didn't actually, he identified many different ways of progressing through to actually meet his crop requirements by using a number of tools, having the faith and support behind us supporting him through his changes, and he's actually seeing an outcome where he is now producing more yield, less fertiliser, but also sustaining his productivity with better sugar. I've got another presentation to do, and if you've got any questions on that, I'm happy to answer those after we do the second presentation. I'll now ask Steve Valla, who's now doing some further trials with us, part of Project Catalyst, to come up on stage.
All Right, thank you. Hello and good morning to everyone. My name is Stephen Vella. Myself, along with my family, are third generational farmers farming 85 hectares of sugarcane land in Farley. Our farm varies from creek flats to black soil, paddocks of undulating land, to paddocks of sloping and inclines. Our traditional farming practice was 4th to 5th ratoons, then a bare fallow before ratoon spray out with trash blanket. We first got involved in Project Catalyst in 2022. We were first approached by Nutrien Ag Solutions if we were interested in changing our farming practices, best management practices such as NP budgeting, fertiliser reduction and legume break cropping into our farming methods, working with support and assistance from Audra Allen, Annette Cochran and Heidi Stevens. For the last 4 years, we've been planting soybeans on our land and other farms managed by Biosecurity Queensland. So I was interested in going a step further and implementing it into our cane fallow management, and always the reductions in fertiliser rates over the years on our property. There hasn't been any significant decrease in crop yield. With our country being farmed in our family for over 70 years, I was keen to bring more biomass back into our soils. We achieved these changes in 2022 and 23. In 23, our soil test results came back from a block of our lease property with very high phosphorus requirements. One of the options during the paddock fallow was the application of mill mud, but with the incline and slope of the paddock, for health and safety reasons, that option was not considered. With the terrain of the country being sloping and inclined, it was always going to be a challenge to apply mill mud as a cost-effective method to add more power to our paddock. With consultations through our Nutrien agent Heidi examining the soil test, we also required lime. After the application of lime, the paddock was planted across the slope, north to south, using the double disc open planter. Conventional fertiliser was applied, side dressed during the operation. Towards the later part of the crushing season, a conversation with Audra was discussed on the amount of phosphorus required on plant cane, being 80 kilos to the hectare for plant and a further 40 kilos a hectare annually on ratoon crops. This is where we decided to compare the traditional fertiliser DAP for the next generation high efficiency phosphate fertiliser structure. Audra will present this further on. The application was split into two halves. DAP was applied with a stool splitter normally, and structure with the use of grub control applicator stool split also. And then later a top dress of granular fertiliser to complete the crop's needs. All of the fertiliser applications were all completed with a three-row stool splitter, which also incorporates a Confidor injection for the liquid fertiliser. On closing, with the assistance given by Nutrien Ag Solutions, Audra Allen, Heidi Stevens for NP budgeting and high efficiency use liquid fertilising, and Project Catalyst Annette Cochran for fertiliser reduction and fallow break cropping, we are all striving to make farming more profitable and sustainable into the future.
Thanks, Steve. So with the role of with phosphorus in sugarcane, I'm just bringing this up in front of you just to give you an idea. Some people aren't aware of what it does in sugarcane. So it promotes early growth formation and growth, spindle development, tillering, and it also is essential for cellular growth, protein development and photosynthesis, respiration and maturity. This is Steve's soil test results. So you can see that he's got a very low, well, it's not very low, but it's a low pH. His CEC is not quite, it's quite low. probably requiring about that 4 tonne to the hectare of lime, but also his calcium levels are low. But the other thing I need to point out to you too is that his aluminium levels are also very high. They're about 5 times the level of in the soil tests itself. So that is also presented previously on why we selected structure as a product, as a more efficiency type product to help against the traditional fertilisers. So this is the block that we actually did a half and half of, and you can see the terrain and why the mill mud trucks were actually quite steep for it to be running on those blocks unless it was going to go up and down, which could create even a bigger issue. The other thing about it was that when we were considering this block, even though Project Catalyst was covering off on a lot of nitrogen, DIN saving and everything like this, phosphorus is another one for water quality. And with the slope of this block, the concern was where we're placing the phosphorus if there was a potential of possible sediment movement. Fortunately, Steve does keep his headlands well grassed. There is a small gully on one side, and we were just trying to make sure that we're keeping the products where they're supposed to be. So post-plant, Steve went with 4 tonne to the hectare of ag lime, even though his soil calcium levels required only 2.5 tonne. The reason why we went with the 4 tonne was to actually try and alleviate those aluminium levels, because I'm a true believer that if there's a high aluminium, considering about 5, the particular variety that he's planted, I've seen in the paddock, has had an adverse effect with the high aluminium levels, so it does drop that yield down a little bit. So this was actually to help alleviate that, free up that aluminium, and to keep moving on forward to keep that crop healthy. So to determine how much phosphorus we were actually doing against some of these new high technology products was that we worked out the plant availability. So DAP is 20% available, plant available, becomes plant available, and the product structure is 80%. So we did a calculation so that both were getting exactly the same plant available phosphorus to ensure that there wasn't going to be any side effects and everything like that. So the other part was the placement of where DAP went in on the side dress, which had the potential on high rainfall to possibly have some of that soil movement. The other thing was, how are we going to get a liquid on after post-planting? So we opted to go through the Confidor or the grub control applicator, which was still split and placed right at the root system where it was more likely to be held up with the roots. So we went in on the 2nd of November to get those done. Steve was doing that. That's the structure side of the block. And then after I was pulling all his nutrient management plans together at the end of January, I realised that I forgot to talk to Steve about increasing his top dress over that structure area, because DAP gave him 45 of nitrogen, whereas the structure product only gave him 9.1 of nitrogen on that application. So we're a little bit short. So I rang him and then asked him, would you mind if I come in with a drone and apply another product? I looked at, we're legally able to apply fertiliser by aerial at this time of the year, but because of the leaf foliage and the granular fertiliser would not have hit the ground. It would have been sitting up in the tops of the roots, and then we would have had leaf burn. So I selected a maximum NPACT. The reason why I picked that was it was low in salts. It was a slow release over 14 days, and we applied it at 20 litres to the hectare. So this was the drone on the day. It was we had 30 mil of rain the night before. We got it on in the morning. It's quite sticky. It was straight out of the bottle, straight into the drone, no mixing, and just flowing out over that hectare. And that's the path the drone actually flew. And that's actually a picture of the leaf of the product on the leaf. So as we're monitoring through the progress of what's been happening, we did a bit of NDIV imaging from when structure was actually first initially laid down against DAP, which are on the same day. This is the growth period, and it was on these photos, the second photo next to the tractor, that I noticed that on the right-hand side of the picture, you could see that the crop was actually turning yellow, and that's where I picked up that, hey, this is where we're lacking a little bit of nitrogen to give it a bit of oomph. And you can see also on the NDIV imaging that it had actually yellowed a little bit while the other one was powering away. So the third picture on the top was actually when we went out and did the drone. That was after the 30 mil of rain. And that's 4 days after we've applied that maximum impact. And you can see that that area has actually started to pick up, and the product is actually doing its job for us. The other thing about not using the granular fertiliser too is with this rain and what we've been getting, volatilisation and all that sort of risk was also another consideration, and why we went to the liquid fertiliser foliage application. I couldn't get another picture, unfortunately. With the NDIV, we've had a lot of rain over the last few weeks, and cloud cover has been hindering me getting that image. So this, I think the next one, I don't know whether I've got it. Nope, it hasn't got the scanning of it. I thought I had it, the drone, I had an image of it coming back round, but you can actually physically see in the paddock that it's all nicely even, it's all nicely green, and we should be able to have a good look at it at the end of the day. So I'm now open for questions or questions to Steve if you...
Has anyone got any questions at all? We'll bring the mic over. Yep.
Yep, good presentation, Audra. Question, with the structure, would you consider using it at planting time and actually putting it into the root zone over the plant? Do we think we might get more of a beneficial establishment of the crop? Because, as you touched earlier, phosphorus is critical for plant establishment and root development.
Yes. That's when we have been applying it. Even if you're using a granular, we've been mixing it in with even just 10 litres of structure into the fungicide tank and applying it through that way. If you're using granular, if you're using your liquids, well, you can always also mix that in with that. So, and we're also mixing it as nutrients, got a planting mixture that we're actually using that as a full planting mixture as well. The thing is that growers probably think that, righto, I've got that in the paddock and I can't see anything in my germination. It's not the germination side of it that you're going to see. It's actually when it gets up to about a metre high and you're going to see better biomass. It's going to look a lot healthier, and your root development is going to assist with that, along with the buffering if you've got any issues in your soils, because it's got long and short chain amino acids, which actually help buffer against some of your high irons, aluminiums, any zincs, if you're in the high pHs, all that sort of thing. So it does do, it is beneficial to use that at planting, yes. But I'm also looking at, in returns as well, if you're using for example, your Confidor applicator or something like that, we may be able to put it in that way as well as a more efficient fertiliser. It's a lot less than the traditional granular. You don't need as much, but it still gives you the plant availability.
Probably got time for one more quick question. Yep, just at the front here. Audra will be around at lunchtime as well if you've got some questions. Thanks, Dennis.
Audra, you'll be following these tests through and to do when you harvest the cane to see whether or not there's any more increase in yield per tonne or whatever, or is it just, it's going to be cost effective, that's all?
That's true. It's got to be more cost effective. It's mainly been a visual type thing because, as you're aware, that once you start putting out strip trials and everything, there's a lot of labour intensive and everything like that. But I'm sure if Steve was going to go through for harvest, I have done some through to harvest, but had some hiccups with deliveries and everything to the mill. Sorry. It's something that we do want to continue following, yes. Sorry? Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, would you please thank Audra and Stephen as well? Thanks so much. Well done. Great job, mate. Well done. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're moving along. Thank you very much. Our next presenter is the Agriculture Extension Officer at Burdekin Productivity Services, and she's here to share with us how growers are doing things differently. If you need some more information on this presentation, it can be found on page 29 of your Project Catalyst magazine. Ladies and gentlemen, right now, would you please welcome Jasmine Gentry.
All right, good morning everyone. I'm Jasmine Gigenti, work at the Burdekin Productivity Services and have been involved in Catalyst for the last, I want to say 4 to 5 years. So today I wanted to have a chat to you about some growers doing some things differently on their farms. So these two guys I'm going to have a chat to you about today aren't actually able to make it. They're very busy, got other commitments, so I did my dodgy recording skills and tried to do some videos for you guys so they could have a chat. Hopefully it works out all right. But these guys are focusing on their soil health and looking at different ways of managing their pests. So I will first introduce John Arati. He came to Project Catalyst in 2020 and we had a bit of a trial there on his farm, so I'll let him explain who he is, what he does and what we had a look at.
G'day folks, I'm John Arati, I'm a Burdekin farmer. Got a little place here in Home Mill on the river. How I started in the industry was my dad come over from the Basque Country to cut cane by hand. There was a big mob of them all come over from the Basque Country. He cut cane in Ingham for a couple of years, and then he come down to the Burdekin, he cut here, met Mum and ended up staying. And after, I don't know, a couple of years, like they all did, they saved up, bought a little joint up in Clare, and that's how we got into it. What got me interested in Catalyst was I used to work at the BSES in the slack season, or the SRA in the slack every year, and that got me interested in all the trials and experimental side of things. And then I got invited to the Townsville show, and then I went up on that bus trip to Lawrence's DeBellas up to Ingham, showcasing the cover crops, and I thought that was it. That's what I need here. That's what I need with the nematodes and that mix and the cover crop mix. And yeah, I thought I'm going to give it a go. And since then I've been trying bits and pieces. I've got nematodes in 2 blocks on the far side, on the eastern side, really sandy pockets, and the nematodes were really, really bad there. I tried chemicals. I had a chemical product to sort them out, but I wasn't keen on that. They done trials, it did work, but I wasn't keen on that. I just wanted some sort of other, like a natural sort of remedy. And anyway, coming across this nematode mix, asking people whatever, and then shout out to Eileen and Jenny from Burdekin Grower Service. They had remembered an old Gumloo farmer that was using molasses, and she wasn't too sure that she had written down the brew and the strength and stuff, so they ended up tracking it down for me, ringing me up. So I went back and photocopied it for me, and I had something to go by then, so I just thought, I'm going to give it a go. So, and the first year was a bit all over the place. I had no, mixtures and strengths and whatever, so I just put up whatever rate I wanted. And then Jasmine come on board, and they did a bit of a trial, and then we figured out that, we needed to bump it up to 500 litres a hectare, which we did. And and it's been going really good. I was lucky to get, third returns in those really bad pockets, and now I'm seeing the whole crop out. So whatever's happening under the ground is definitely working. So, and no, I haven't stopped. I've been using it ever since. I've probably been, God knows, 5, 6 years now, flat out using it. And I've had a few farmers come around and have a look at my old bodgy setup, and they go away. And I think they're giving it a go too. So, which is good. Yeah, I had nothing to put it out. So I had no 10-time fertiliser box, that the box was completely US on it. And anyway, I removed the box, got a little PDO driven gear pump and ran stainless steel tubes down the outside, and got a tank for the front of the tractor, And it works really well. So at max rate, it puts out 500 litres, which is what we need. And I've been using it ever since. It's only a small tank, so I'm looking at maybe upgrading the implement to get a bigger tank, so I don't have to come back to the shed as often. The molasses increases the microbe levels in the soils, and then when the numbers increase at that level, they also keep the bad nematodes at bay, and then it's all a bit of you help them and they'll help you, sort of then it's a big food web triangle, and that's it. It's just it's a win all round, I think.
On what we went through. So a little bit behind the idea of molasses. So David talked about, having your pub and having your good food. So essentially what we're trying to address here is that we have some pretty shit food, so we want to try and up that a little bit. So we're increasing food sources, so we're going to get better microbes. So that food web is going to be able to pretty much help itself and create a more complex ecology in the soil. And that way, we can hopefully combat these parasitic nematodes that John is having issues with. So not all nematodes are bad. I thought I'd put a couple of pictures here because we always tend to focus on the bad guys, But there's plenty of good ones in there. So that first one is root lesion nematode. That's what John's got issues with. In the middle there is a predatory nematode. So he's stabbing another nematode, having a feed. So there's some pretty good ones in there as well. And then this funky looking picture over here is some fungi that actually traps nematodes and eats them, which is pretty cool. What we ended up doing was having a 1-to-1 ratio of water to molasses because molasses is quite thick. We wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to clog up, so we ended up diluting that. And I reckon you could probably go a little bit stronger on the molasses, but that's just sort of the rate we stuck with. So 500 litres a hectare is what we went with. What we ended up doing was a control. So we had no application of molasses. We had strips of the 500 litres, and then we had strips of 500 litres applied twice, but there was 4 weeks in between. So we're trying to, put a bit more extra food in there, and then we're going to see what happened with that. So I've just got a graph here. When we actually did the baseline test before we even put any molasses out, it actually really surprised us, like this is great for John, but it came back with a lot of good nematodes. We decided to do the trial anyway, but yeah, pretty much blue bars are your good ones, orange bars are your bad ones, and that's a percentage of the nematodes in that sample. So you can see the single dosage, sort of on the middle over towards the left there, actually increased a little bit of everything. So we're like, oh, okay. But when we put more molasses on, so that double application, it actually suppressed those parasitic nematodes and increased the overall beneficials, which is what we were sort of hoping to see. Now, we did take this to harvest as well. So we wanted to have a look at tons of cane, CCS, and tons of sugar. When we looked at the tons of cane, bugger all in it. There was only a couple of tons difference here and there, but not even really worth mentioning. However, CCS surprised me a bit. That was actually a little bit higher. I'm pretty sure it's in the magazine. I've got that graph in there, so if you want to have a look at that. And of course, because the CCS was higher in the molasses applications, the tons of sugar were higher, and it was like 1.6 units on average. So this is only 1 year's worth of results. We didn't take it any further, but John is still doing this. So it would actually be interesting to see over years of application of molasses how that is actually affecting the yield as well and the microbial community. All right, next I have got Dave Fowler. Again, he couldn't make it here today, but I've got a video and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, my name's Dave Fowler. I'm a 5th generation sugarcane farmer. I've been something that I've always been passionate about is growing sugarcane. I guess you could say from as a little boy growing up with my brothers, riding around in the back of the old Toyota, going to change water, helping Dad out, pull pumps out. You can't grow up much better than that. My family has been farming since 1912 in the Burdekin area, so I guess that's, you could say, a bit of a legacy for myself to continue to do that, and hopefully one day my boys we'll be able to take on and become the 6th generation. So biggest restraints, I guess, for myself would be time, as I still work another full-time job and then run the farms after that. So that's between having a young family and trying to do all that, always looking at ways to improve or make things faster, more efficient. So one of the projects I'm currently undertaking now is setting up some automatic irrigation, which is a fairly big job because not only the automation side, but the infrastructure side. So getting my infrastructure up to date to where I need to be to do that. So you need like enough outlets that you don't have to go around changing cups. So that's where I sort of started, been working on that for the last 6 years, and now we're finally at the final stages of setting the automation up. And by doing that, then hopefully I can do some more travelling, spend some more time with family. Probably another restraint for myself would be battling nematodes on my sandier soils. So it is a tough one to manage. There are products out there, but I don't want to nuke it, I guess you could say, and put some pretty toxic chemicals into my ground. So I guess the main reason I've decided to go do this Catalyst project is to get some more information about some of the products out there and to get some actual data on your soil health and crop growth, because at the end of the day, putting on more fertilizer, more nitrogen doesn't always result in bigger yields, more sugar. So I've gone down the route of using biostimulants. We've done a trial using Rhizoveta OB and Bastum 100. So I applied that at the planting stage. I had a separate tank on the planter that we mixed that product in, diluted with water to get our rates to put it on. Separate spray, so it would actually spray down into your furrow just before the soil was covered back over to seal the billets off. So by doing that, we want to enrich our soil, get all those microorganisms going, trying to fight off those bad nematodes. That's the end goal anyway. Now we're going to do trials on the humic acid. So I'll probably come across that product from a friend of mine who has an organic farm. Basically did some research on reading up what it does, and then I thought, geez, we need to do a trial on this, because if it does what it says, well, we should be able to reduce nitrogen by quite a lot and still get the same results in crop and yield. Recently, with an expansion of my farms, probably look at growing some alternate crops now, just for soil health, because I mean, if you're always going to grow cane back to back, you're sort of going to start depleting your soil. So start looking at legumes, beans or corn, just to help keep that soil healthy. Basically, at the end of the day, we want to look after our soil because that looks after us.
All right, so Dave just had a chat to you about what we were looking at. So he came on board in 2022, and we had a look at the Bastum Rhizoveta combination, just something that he was particularly interested in. So a little bit of background about those two products. Your Bastum introduces 5 strains of bacteria into the soil, and your Rhizoveta is like your food source. So it's got fulvic acid, amino acids, kelp, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So he was really keen to give this a go. We also wanted to sort of test how they work together, because they're meant to increase your nutrient uptake and potentially increase your yield. So he wanted to have a look at how this was going to affect his nitrogen application. So we ended up taking a soil test, working out that it was a replant rate, so there was only a couple of weeks between harvesting his last crop and replanting this trial block, just nature of how it worked. So we needed 200 kilos of nitrogen for his replant. We decided to do a plant fallow rate as well at 160, and then we went even less than the 6 easy steps and did 120, just to sort of see how this was going to affect the cane. So we took some biology samples just to try and have a look at where we were at the very start. So there's a whole bunch of pretty cool looking tests there that sound really smart, but essentially we're trying to have a look at the fungi that's in the soil, the bacteria that's in the soil, the overall microbial biomass and CO2 respiration. So they're all really good indicators of activity happening in the soil. What we ended up doing as well was doing some root sort of analysis. We ended up digging up about 1 metre worth of billets after we planted and applied the biostimulants just to sort of see if there was any more root vigour. So you're looking for fine hairs, overall general biomass. Unfortunately, we didn't see anything there, but you'll see these weird little stringy looking things. We did see a little bit of fungi going on, which was quite interesting. So we're pretty interested in that, and that was in the low nitrogen treatment with the biostimulant. However, when we had a look at the results of the biological tests, the fungal presence actually decreased from our first test before we had the biostimulants to later. And I think that's just a fact of the quick turnaround of ploughing out cane and then replanting again. So there was food source there, then it's gone, and we've gone and planted again. But literally all the other tests that we did, and there were heaps of them, didn't actually show any sort of soil biology interaction there. When it comes to the yield results, there was no difference in the tonnes of cane per hectare. So that's, I've got a bit of a graph there. The green bars are the low nitrogen, blue bars are the middle, and the orange is the high, and the sort of faded out colours are your biostimulant treatments. There was no difference in CCS, no difference in tonnes of sugar. What we also saw was that there was no difference in the nitrogen rates. So everything yielded the same across the whole lot. So that's sort of telling us that the nitrogen was not the limiting factor here, and the biostimulants might not have worked as we thought that they would have initially. So these products aren't exactly cheap. I'm not badgering the product. You know, it could be just certain conditions that we were given that year, factor farming practices. There's a whole bunch of variables in place. But for this particular trial, we didn't necessarily see any benefit from applying these products. We are looking down the track of trialling humic acids this year. So we've applied 2 nitrogen rates. We've gone with the 200 for ratoons, and then we've dropped it right back to 85. So we're going to see if that low rate has an effect, and plus and minus with the humic acid as well. So that's sort of what we're looking at there. Hopefully this has an effect on his nematode issue as well. We're keeping an eye on that. But yeah, we will see next year.
Ladies and gentlemen, while we've got the opportunity, I'm just wondering if there's any questions for Jasmine at all. Surely there's a few. Right. Here we go.
Hi, Jasmine. Mark Castanelli from here. Looking at that molasses work that you're doing, really interesting stuff. It's nothing new about it. It's been around for some time as a remedy. Are you looking at doing further trials, maybe putting it in at planting stage with planting equipment, or you're just happy to put it in post-plant and early development?
Yeah, look, it's something I'm interested in looking at in a little bit more, and John's pretty keen to continue on that path. So he's actually going to upgrade his tank. It's only got like a 600-litre tank at the moment, so he's upgrading to a 1,000-litre tank, which probably gives him a little bit more leeway with what he can do there. So that could potentially be an option, putting it in, with the planting. But yeah, we'll have to have a chat about that.
I was just going to add, obviously EC mapping or EM mapping is going to designate areas where you could do if you wanted to put it on variable parts of a paddock, because it's not, generally it's not a problem across the whole paddock, it's just select areas.
Yeah, I wonder if EM mapping would bring that up, because it is a pest issue particularly, so yield mapping may show those poor patches a little bit better, and then we can try and address that issue. They do tend to be in lighter soil, so maybe EM mapping can help to an extent. But yeah, it seems to be, he's got generally light soil overall with patches of very, very light stuff because he's right up on the river. But I guess, EM mapping is something we could potentially look at.
Alrighty, folks, we're just about out of time there. Ladies and gentlemen, how about a big round of applause for Jasmine? Fantastic presentation. Thanks so much. And remember, with all of our speakers, if you do... Thanks, mate. If you do need any further information or you've got further questions, please, pick their brain over lunch. That's what they're there for. Also the magazine, of course, which also brings us to our next presenter, the Wet Tropics area. Ladies and gentlemen, here to discuss with you the positives of social networking when taking on major practice change. And as I said, it is on page 41 onwards of your magazine. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please give a warm welcome to Megan Zammel.
All right. Good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Megan Zammel, and I'm the service provider for Project Catalyst in the Herbert region. Today with me is Alan Lynn, a grower from the Herbert as well, and we're going to discuss the importance that social networking has in helping growers adapt to new practice changes into their farming systems. Can you hear me? All right. Better? Yeah. All right, social networking can sometimes be dismissed as the fun part of work functions and information sessions, but we believe that it holds much more value than just having a good time with friends and colleagues. Social networking can often exchange the ideas and begin discussions with like-minded people and can lead to long-term friendships and support. It can give people the opportunity to touch on in a safe environment, to ask questions and inquire deeper into a subject that was touched on formally, and allows us to learn from someone else's successes, but just importantly, their failures. Alan Lynn has often been described in the Herbert region as a mentor to other growers, but he doesn't necessarily see himself as one, and describes the exchange of information between growers as networking. Alan, with his wife Jenny, have joined a number of industry groups, including Catalyst, over the years, and this has allowed them to connect with like-minded people from all over the country. Through these networks, Alan, you've been able to draw on your experience and knowledge from other growers, researchers, and agronomists, and in turn, you've been able to pass along your own experiences to others who are looking to try something new.
I definitely don't think I'm a mentor, so I've been thrown up here on the deep end, but I'm like all you blokes out here. I've come here to learn and to network. And one of the things I've learned by coming to these things, help is only a phone call away from anyone in this room. So that's something we have to remember. If we need help, just make a phone call because someone will help you.
All right, so Alan, you initially got started into the soil health space when you went to a David Hardwick Digging Deeper course in 2016. After this course, you decided that you needed to change some of your farming practices in a pretty big way. Can you please tell us about the initial triggers that made you realise that you needed to change?
I probably should start a bit earlier than that. In 2009, the catalyst for change was probably my first GPS, and that gave me the ability to repeat stuff. And from there, I farm in a reasonably wet area, so compaction's probably one of my number one issues. So I went across to 1,800 row spacings and put up mounds. That was in 2010. And then gradually worked on from then, made a mounder that just made mounds, and I planted beans. And I planted soybeans, cowpea, whatever I could get my hands on. And I had a bit of the wrong mindset at that time because I looked at beans as nitrogen and I was planting them for the wrong reason. I was planting them straight out for N. I've learnt from David since then I was on the wrong track. But as I went down the road, just from growing the beans, I found the soil was that good that I wanted to try to keep my beds because I was still knocking the beds down and working conventionally afterwards. I looked around and I could not find anything that gave me that ability. So I dragged the old returning discs out of the grass, a small set, and modified them. After about 10 goes, I got them pretty well what I thought was right, and they worked brilliantly. And then in 2016, I met David. I did a Digging Deeper, and that changed my whole mindset on what I was doing, because I worked out that the end wasn't my goal in growing beans. End was a byproduct of what I was doing. And the advantages of those multi-species and beans way outweighed the end that I got in the thing. End was something I had to manage at the end of it, so it was only really a byproduct. I learned a lot of things out of those, building that first little mounder. The disc spacings, the tighter the disc spacing, the finer the till, speed. There's a lot of things. Too big a disc don't work. And they've all been transferred across into the larger units I built at a later date. But we should probably keep going and go into that.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you about how you initially come up with that idea. You've already pretty much started with that, so you can keep continuing if you like.
Once I built the first small set, Mark Poggio and Michael Waring approached me. They were having trouble. They had purchased a wavy disc, and in the heavy clays it wasn't working, wouldn't go in, they weren't getting the results. And they borrowed my small renovator and took it, come back, loved it. They said, we want one, but we want a larger version so we can incorporate straight after. So I sat down, designed a larger version. We had to make a fair few alterations to get things right. Those alterations worked pretty well. So their first unit was the first large unit that I made, and then we made multiples after that. And I made one for myself and sold a fair few around the district before I retired from that side of engineering.
So we just have a little video here of one of the early modifications in action for anyone who hasn't actually seen this before. It's been modified quite a few times since this video was taken. Okay, so the man here on the screen is Cameron Barber. Now, Cameron joined the Project Catalyst in 2021 because he could see the benefits of such a social network. Unfortunately, Cameron couldn't make it here today, but he has been given us a video of his story on how he met Alan and how they developed the bed renovator to suit the needs of Wilma at the time. Sorry.
Sheep belt in country Victoria. I joined Catalyst in 2021. So I've heard about Catalyst, I knew about Catalyst, and it's always good to be amongst a group of like-minded people that enjoy to push the boundaries. So when I first moved up to the Herbert area, I spent 12 months really looking and watching and trying to find out what best management practices are, and after 12 months, I was going to try to increase the minimum tillage components to the Wilmar system. And I was introduced to Alan as he was already doing a lot of those things. And he showed me his Mounder renovator and how it works. And then I trialled that on the Wilmar farms, and it's been successful. So we moved into developing that to make it fit the Wilmar system. He lent the renovator to me in 18, and we did a trial with it and finished up doing, we probably did 150 acres with it.
Yeah, okay.
Fairly quickly, and it really showed itself then, and we were able to take some reasonably hostile clay soils and get a very good result out of it. So much so that the previous owner of that farm was the planter, and he'd never seen that happen in all his life, and he was just amazed. Wilmar's 4,500 acres,
yeah.
So we really had to upscale it, and Alan was important in engineering it and designing it. So Charles Argenti was the planter,
Yeah, okay.
who was planting our cane at that time, and seeing is believing, and he was quite amazed with it. So by the time we finished planting and got round to saying we need to adopt this technology, Charles jumped on board fairly quick. He was also involved in the designing it to upscale it from a single row renovator to something that was of a lot larger scale. Alan's one makes mounds and renovates them at the same time. It's one machine does 2 passes. So we didn't need the mounder that we got from Vertican anymore. We were able to use our one, which did a better job. You can never take one idea and transplant it somewhere and it works 100%. There's always going to be a change, and even someone 5 mile down the road will have to probably use it differently.
Yeah.
Whether it's sand, whether it's clay, whether it's waterlogged, whether it's a lot of trash. There are different reasons and different things you have to change. I'm still changing, adopting what I've done. It still takes a long time. So you can only do so much at one time before your head gets jumbled and you feel like you're running an experiment farm instead of a commercial farm. But yeah, certainly legumes and things like that will come into it. I'm planting legumes now. The adoption of it still is a while away, but on the track of getting it done. I never really rank importance of where you get information. You just never know. It could be a newspaper article, it could be talking to someone in the street,
yeah.
It could be someone over the fence, but certainly more often than not, if you're making a big change, it'll be a farmer like Alan Lynn that's done it before. Having someone like Alan to talk to and just to reassure you, things like that is always very helpful. You still need those early adopters in the area like Alan, because obviously he couldn't look over the fence and see it. There was no one doing that. So people like Alan in an area are very important to the adoption and to adapting change. So we've got to celebrate those early adapters like Alan to give them encouragement and keep them going.
have support than try to go it alone. And there's plenty of support out there now. I think we need it.
All right, so as an extension agronomist, I can't stress the importance of trials, and more trials on your farm at a small scale to work it out and gain confidence. Have that conversation with different people from all over the agricultural industry and make that phone call of what the hell happened here. Try not to be embarrassed about your failures, but use them as lessons on what not to do, because I can guarantee you that the people you're reaching out to would have had similar issues, as teething problems are just inevitable when you're trying a new system. The other important thing to remember when you're trying a new practice in the sugarcane industry is that patience is an absolute must. You will very rarely see changes within the first few years of trying something, so try to give it a crop cycle before you make your end decision. Alan, would you agree with this?
Yes, definitely. And do one change at a time and make sure you manage it right. Because if you do a heap of changes in one go, it's very hard to work out which one was the wrong one, because you always make mistakes. Everything doesn't work how you think it is. Like, just go steady. Don't rush in and do one big project, make 10 changes and say, that didn't work.
All right, so Alan, over the last few years, you've been sharing your experiences with many other people from all over the industry, as we've seen here firsthand today. You've always been generous in sharing your knowledge despite the risk of negativity, which you touched on earlier. So, but once again, why is that?
I just think we have to accept change. It's inevitable what we do, and change is moving faster than we think. For us, political change is probably one of the ones that's hurting us, but we have to stay ahead of the ball. And one of the things I think we have to do is there's pluses and minuses in everything we do in farm management. We have to make the pluses a winner and try to, the negatives, try to learn from them. Any mistake we made, we will learn better from our mistakes than we do from our wins. So, but you have to remember, there's no silver bullet. And I think everyone sitting in this room realises that.
All right, so social networking doesn't just add value to people within the industry, but also the upcoming generation of agronomists, growers and industry people. Alan, with his wife Jenny, who was the Ingham High School agricultural teacher before she retired, has always been involved in encouraging the next generation. In an ageing industry, Alan's wife Jenny has been a big advocate for educating the younger people who are interested in agriculture. She's also organised many farm excursions out to their own farm to show what's involved in growing cane and what's involved in the farming business. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Jenny today. Thank you very much for all your hard work and sharing that knowledge as well. You're not to be forgotten about. Just one more slide.
Can I say one thing? I don't think we invest enough into our youth. As farmers, we do not try to promote ourselves. We do not sell our business very well. That's why we're running into labour shortages and a lot of problems. I don't think as a business we sell ourselves well enough. How we get around that, I don't know. But I see that as a major problem in the industry.
All right, so I just wanted to say a big thank you for all of the guys sitting here today who have taken on the risks. A lot of the times, the innovators that take on these initial challenges do so at their own peril. So thank you very much to all of you guys and Alan. As myself and the industry, we all really appreciate it. Thank you very much. I don't know if we have time for questions. No, we do.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a couple of minutes for questions, if anybody has any. Don't be shy, people. Don't be shy.
Anyone got a question for Alan about his story, machinery, broader adoptions? No? You all know him, do you? You've all been following his work? Yeah? He's pretty well renowned. Any questions for Megan? Nope. Great. Well, we can move on because the sooner we finish this session, the sooner we get to lunch out by the pool.
So true. Ladies and gentlemen, how about another big round of applause for Megan and Alan, please? And right now, please have a look at the screen. We've got another video for you.
We won't be able to feed the world by 2050. That's not too long away. And it's the protein that they're looking for. And when we talk about biofutures and the fact that you can use sugar, the sugar crystal, not just the juice, the sugar crystal as the basis for bio-brewed protein, that's an enormous future. And we're talking about things like milk or egg white. And that's the protein that the rest of the world, and most of the rest of the world that lives to our immediate north, that's where the demand is going to come from. And we're in the box seat to be able to produce that here.
So I think the key thing to know about future foods is that it's as well as, it's not instead of the currently produced, meats and chickens and eggs and milk. So the real issue is that the world's population is predicted to go to 10 billion people within a generation almost, and there's just not enough land, water, fertiliser to feed 10 billion people. So the ability to create a protein source out of something like connecting to a sugar mill and using raw sugar as a feedstock, it's already made. There's no more land required. There's no more changes to irrigation systems and things like that. So to then convert, the raw sugars currently going into beverages or alcohol or foods, the ability to take that, grow a yeast or a fungi or a microorganism to make biomass, which then can extract proteins, is a really efficient way of producing bulk protein that the world needs for people, for animals, for agriculture and other things.
This is a 100-litre fermenter. It works with liquids inside, so a bit like your homebrew system at home or something. But as you can see, it's got this computer control system on the side. It's got different pumps. And so the goal here is precision fermentation, and so we can really finely monitor the different conditions inside this vessel. We can control what gases and things are fed into it, so there's different microbes, like there's one called Pichia, where it consumes one feedstock and then you can actually change and feed it methanol and it will activate a different pathway.
People have been making beer for thousands of years, and so the whole concept of fermentation using yeast to then produce alcohols and other chemical products has been around forever. The precision fermentation piece is where they can look at creating an organism that, say you grow a yeast or you grow a fungi or you grow a microorganism, they genetically modify that yeast so that if it gets shocked with methanol, it can throw out a protein that has particular DNA characteristics the same as milk or eggs or meat. So yeah, there's a lot of laboratory development that's happened over decades, and the world, everywhere in the world now is at this point where they're ready to scale up. So they're definitely proven at a lab scale, some demonstration scale around the world, but there's not many, I guess, commercial scale precision fermentation production facilities in the world. So yeah, this project that we're doing here in conjunction with Cauldron and Main Sequence and others, yeah, it's sort of cutting edge.
Fifth generation local, Mayor Greg Williamson got a glimpse of the bio-commodity future for the sugar industry in America 8 years ago.
It was a very exciting concept because of the fact that we have in Queensland and in Australia the ability to produce a huge amount of sugar here. And BioFutures, the two conferences that I had the privilege of attending in the United States, one in Boston and one in Philadelphia, was about that enormous future. The first one I found was a whole lot of academics talking about what is possible. And I said, unless that changes, unless we got people on the ground, and that's what this Forum 24 is all about, unless we got people with the experience and with the commercial knowledge to actually make this happen, it'll only be just talk fests. And thankfully, the next one I went to was a lot more commercially orientated. So I think we can see now in the future for Australia, in the future for this region, a tremendous opportunity to capitalise on what the whole world is talking about right now, and that's a biofutures, a bioindustry.
For more than 22 years, Darren Reckerman has worked closely with the sugar industry and heads up the research and development of sustainable aviation fuels in the Mackay pilot plant site.
We're working on a process starting from the agricultural residue, the bagasse, after it's squeezed out all the sugar. That's a fibre feedstock, which is a lot different to some of the other feedstock routes for producing sustainable aviation fuels. In our process, what we first need to do is to break that fibre down into small liquid chemical compounds. We then aim to build those chemical compounds back up into a carbon chain length that's suitable to be converted to a fuel. The last part of the step is to remove any oxygen so that we get a very energy dense fuel. It needs to operate under much harsher conditions, such as the low temperature that you see up in the sky. So there's a number of additional properties that it needs to have compared to sustainable diesel.
So this is our hydrotreater. So it's used a lot in the petrochemical industry. That column is actually a pressure vessel. So it goes up to about 3,000 psi. And then we also control the temperature, it goes up to about 350 degrees. If you change some of the seals, it can actually go up to about 500. So very high pressures, very high temperatures. And then we take a feed material, so what we term a biocrude. So in the petrochemical industry, they just use like crude oil, put that in. And then what it does is actually has hydrogen goes in the top, and that reacts, there's a catalyst bed in there, and the hydrogen scavenges any free oxygen from your feedstock, and through the reaction you actually get longer carbon chains, and so that's then what you use for your different fractions of fuels. So the goal with this one is you put your biocrude in, you can create like a renewable diesel with it, and then through the hydrotreating process you can also get a sustainable aviation fuel. We also do a lot with, there's a lot of interest in just demonstrating different milling processes, looking at different ways to use various biomasses. So as part of the upgrade, we're actually hoping to get a twin screw extruder. With that extruder, you can actually use it to, you know how you get like the takeaway, the cane fibre cutlery and that type of thing. So you can actually use it to trial that type of stuff.
We've been involved with 3 international companies, Cauldron is one, and they are very, very close to actually making pilot projects. We've actually got the state government very, very close to actually around the Racecourse Sugar Mill, declaring a state development area, and then another state development area down in Rosella, and that's all about a future for the bioindustries. That's all about providing the ability to be right next door to a power source. That's the cogen plant at Racecourse Mill in the sugar industry, right next door to a mill that actually can supply the carbon content. And then once we can prove that concept, then the future is absolutely enormous and very exciting.
Whilst there is a global focus on the biofutures industry, sustainable aviation fuels are currently blended with conventional fuels. Widespread production and use of SAFs is limited by costs and requires significant investment.
Petroleum refining's been there for 50 years, so they've had a lot of time to develop all these technologies and equipment. We're just starting off in the process. We found it's very easy to produce high yields in the laboratory, but it's that next stage, taking it to a pilot plant or a small demonstration plant, that we need to undertake to be able to prove all those economics. And a lot of companies that we work with are in that current stage of trying to raise funds to get those first pilot plants operational. In our case, using agricultural residues, it's slightly less developed than, say, the alcohol to jet route, or using oil crops, or tallow and fats and grease. But one of the things we're trying to do is make our sugar factories more energy efficient, so that we can have lots of the gas feedstock to make other commodities. Sustainable aviation fuels is just one of them. But it's something that we need because some of these other routes, whether it's from alcohol whether it's from tallow or oil crops, there's not enough feedstock out there to produce all the sustainable aviation fuels that we need.
Developing new resource production and consumption models requires sustainable processes to ensure a viable future. Reusing and recycling materials and byproducts to extend economic benefits.
The alternative protein, they'll have different yields for different processes, but it could be as low as like 5% yield up to maybe 15%. But it means that that's the alternative to an egg or a chicken or a beef patty, so to speak. But you still have all of the biomass in the yeast. So the remainder of that, yeast contains energy, it contains protein, it contains nutrient that is useful. So the plant has to be balanced. So we have to, in this facility, not only provide, alternative proteins that meet the quality specifications. They're dried down to 8% moisture. You put them in a bag as a powder so you can send them around the country or around the world. But you've then got all this yeast co-product in this platform. Others will have a fungi-based platform. Others will have an algae-based platform. Others will have a microorganism. But the ability to, say, take the co-product yeast and develop it into a feedstock for animal feed or aquaculture feed is really important. So the commerciality, again, relies on you not paying to get rid of waste products, but getting revenue from your main product and revenue from your co-products. So if you look at where we're located, there's some feedlots here. There's quite a burgeoning cattle industry. We've got Tassal down the road with a 5,000 tonne per annum prawn farm. We've got a barramundi farm. So in the aquaculture industry, the ability to get wild-caught proteins will probably, at a sustainability level, be curtailed in the future. So if you could produce or have an ingredient to a protein source for prawns or fish aquaculture, then that's obviously solving another circular economy problem. So as all of these things, the more and more processes you add on, the more reliance you are on other people, the more cost, but that's the balance. And so commerciality is really, people talk about circular economy, what does it mean? In this case, it means that you use all of the feedstock and all of the available energy as cheaply and as efficiently as you can. And then on all of the waste product side, you can recycle all of your waters, you can contain, not have runoff, not have anything that costs money to process, and then all the co-product gets used up and put into, ideally, a circle that goes back out and feeds cattle, so more cattle can be produced for food.
A couple of benefits that I can see. The fact that young people, young farming people, might be able to see, hey, hang on, we can actually do something to feed the world with sugarcane. It's not just growing it to put in Coca-Cola or something like that. It's growing it for a carbon content to feed the world. Growers will grow it as long as they're going to get a price per tonne that they can actually grow it profitably for. And so that's the challenge. That's the challenge for the industry. That's the challenge for the state government. That's the challenge for the bio-brew industry sector, to be able to make it a marketable product and yet return a profit to everybody in the chain. It requires a whole of Australia approach, a whole of government approach in the state and federal and local government. Competitively, I think we're there. We've just got to make sure that, we get the right sort of players on board. Already in Kentucky now, there's a pilot project plant being constructed now to produce milk from a carbon content. It could be the carbon content supplied by sugar, and that's what we need to be on the front foot to be able to do.
Of Australia's second largest sugar milling company, Mackay Sugar, and is also the chairperson of the Australian Sugar Milling Council. Now, since moving from Copenhagen to Queensland in 2019, I tell you what, Yannick, that is some serious climate change, my friend, Copenhagen to Queensland. Yannick is a driving force behind the growth and development of the sugar industry to become a resilient, agile and more versatile industry poised for greater success in the years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please give a very warm welcome to Mr. Yannick Olaus.
Thank you. Let's see. I put this one back here, see if we can navigate something like that. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me here. I just figured out after seeing this presentation that what I'm going to say here is going to be just so much more tough, because now I have to navigate between technology and politicians. So I'll see if I can find a smooth way down there. Yeah, I'm already introduced, so I'm Danish national. You'll hear that on the accent. That also means that I've seen the world from a little bit from a different angle than just from Australia. Doesn't mean it's better, it's just different. Let me put it like that. So hopefully we can have all that flow into what messages I would like to bring across today. I got the great topic to speak about how we navigate the sugar industry towards 2030, but even more so beyond that. So at least I'd like to share with you some thoughts. Hopefully I don't think it'll provoke many people in this room, but certainly there'll be a challenge for every one of us in this room. So, and that might leave room for a debate as well. We already heard from the previous video that the future is bright. Well, everybody will make up their own mind on that. With my 30 years in sugar, global sugar, I do feel that this is as good as it gets, or has been, so to speak. But we've said that many times. We've been standing there and saying this is going to happen. But it is a very promising outlook. And why is it so promising? And especially here, I think we already heard that. We have the building blocks. Really, you can basically, if you have done your chemistry, you can do anything out of sugar. We heard that. That is going to come. So a lot of that from sugar. Darren from QUT was already speaking about the next generation when we start using the fiber, transforming fiber, not just into products straight up as fibrous products, but certainly convert the fiber, and thereby that could be bagasse, that could be tops and trash and so on. So definitely a positive there. We're on the doorstep of Asia. I mean, nothing wrong with Australia and our own country here and the wealth and the population and the demand, but being on the doorstep of Asia just means that we are on the doorstep of a very fast-growing population, and more so an increasingly wealthy population. So that's certainly going to support us, support our business. It supports our sugar today and certainly also going forward. I've referenced here the Sugar Plus roadmap. By now it is well over a year old. I'll not ask you to raise your hand if you have read it, but I'll certainly encourage everyone to have a look at it. It's a great piece of work across the whole industry, basically summing up a lot of these opportunities that you have heard about. So if you want to have a little bit of a context, what does that look like? I think at the end of the day, the bottom line is the demand that you can see way outgrows the material, so the resource that we even have available here in Queensland. That's actually a good place to be. It would be much worse if it was the other way around. Also importantly, in the roadmap, when you read it through, it outlines all the steps that are required for us to, that we have to go through, that are believed that we have to make in order to increase the likelihood of success. Not necessarily arriving at the finish line, but I believe increase the likelihood of success. Let's see. So, just very quick, as I said, there are a lot of technological people who can speak way longer on this. But I think what's characterized the opportunities that we see them right now is they're generally, you could say, established markets. The needs for the products that we are thinking about, that we're discussing, be it proteins, fuels, or plastics. Well, the need is there. We just want it presented in a different way, produced in a different manner. We talk about alternative foods. We saw Steve Cutting, I believe it was, with a Petri dish, we talk about making eggs without chicken, making milk without a cow, and so on. It's often called alternative proteins. I believe, let's be honest, it's actually supplementary proteins. Even today, less than half of the world is well fed. That's the reality. And by 2050, 10 billion people is forecasted. I dare say we won't be able to keep up with the food need of the global population. So clearly we need more protein in a smarter way. This is where this comes in. This is the opportunity for us to grow it from the carbon source. Biofuels, well, everything right here, right now, and a number of you will be up from north, up from Townsville. All last week was all about Jet Zero. That's all about sustainable aviation fuel to be produced up in Townsville, as recent as that. At least that's the next step. That's their plan. So a lot of biofuels is very much about sustainable aviation fuel. Sustainable aviation fuel is seen as the most promising way for decarbonizing the aviation industry, or the only really feasible way. They do talk about electrical flights or electrical planes, short haul. I'll just let that one sit with everyone just a sec, how we have it with batteries, but nevertheless, then we all know that sustainable aviation fuel derived out of good Queensland cane, that's this thing. So that's what they're working on. That's really going to be interesting. If we just expand fuels again, we've heard a number of the presentations already today that, we actually have sometimes to stand up. Fuels, let's go a little bit broader and think electricity. We're already in this space. We're also in the fuel space. We've been producing bioethanol for decades, right? Never really taken off in big scale, massive scale, but we have it, right? So we're not totally behind. Everything right now is about SAF, first generation, yes, based on any direct carbon source, but as we heard from QUT, working on breaking down fiber, and basically that way, that's what they would call second generation bioethanol, and use that for SAF. Bioplastics, again, also not really a new thing. I guess we have these kind of products already on the shelves and even the bags to carry the products home in. We often see the bottle, a bottle, as the imagery used when we talk bioplastics in presentations. I also have one of those. And I guess that's because what we have seen, one of the big global soft drink companies driving that journey, certainly to get some more renewable material into the plastic bottles. I guess really what we should focus on, there's one common theme across all of this, and that's maybe the point I would like to make today, and that is it's all about decarbonizing. Mayor Williamson doesn't believe in decarbonizing in the sense of we actually use the carbon still. So that's actually a good one. But nevertheless, we talk about decarbonization, we talk about net zero, we talk about climate impact. And that goes across all this. It's needs, it's products we have today, but we want them delivered in a different form and shape with a different impact on our planet. This is the business opportunity. This is the size of the prize, I guess is the way to say. These are pretty big numbers. I just did a Google search on the world sugar market last year, and I guess I don't have to remind everyone in this room that prices have been okay-ish. Is that a way to put it, last year's? So certainly, but even last year, the global sugar market reached a total value of 120 billion. So biofuels even today is bigger than that. That's the estimated biofuels market. As late as last week, on the back of the Townsville presentation from Jet Zero, I saw a research which says that the biofuels market by 2029 is now estimated to reach a staggering 294 billion Australian dollars. So this is pretty big. I think, you know, if we want a share of that, I think there's also room for our industry, certainly. It is a big prize, and as all big prizes, they also carry a very, very big risk. In general, all these products, as it is with new tech, they're generally more expensive to produce than old technologies, which have been refined, and refined yet again over years, over decades. So they're more expensive from the get-go. There might be some skepticism towards the more conventional variant. So there might be some insecurities around that demand that I just said, well, everybody wants it. Well, maybe that's not true, certainly not if it's more expensive. And also, politics play a big role. The big decisions, we heard that, have to be made. Policy actually matters. Years back, like I said, going back a little bit to Europe, everything was about bioethanol. We built bioethanol plants like crazy. Millions, hundreds of millions of euros going into bioethanol. And now, not because I left, but certainly after I left, it seems that everything in Europe is going electric. Then it's not very, very funny to be the owner of a big bioethanol plant. I think there's a lot of industrial players looking at that and saying, so what does stability actually mean for us to put down the dollars? Most importantly, all this will require very aligned efforts, so a collaborative approach. Industry collaboration, as we call it out here, this is also from the Sugar Plus roadmap. Industry collaboration is about making what we do today even better. So keep on improving. Don't sit and wait for this just to happen or somebody comes and does it for us. Let's keep on progressing and making sure that we across our entire value chain optimize that along the way. Get rid of all inefficiencies. New technologies, we heard that, definitely. We need to leverage. But again, let's do it smart. There are people out there who have the ideas. We have to invite them in and get their ideas in. So we need to enhance our value chain. So where we had miller, grower, harvester, transport, whatever classic value chain, we might just need to build in some new people there because they got the ideas. That also means that the business model as such most likely will change for decades. I'm sure I don't have to educate anybody in this room. You know, we all know the role of the miller and the role of the grower, pretty well established, the expectations and so on. Growers grow, millers produce sugar and other products. That has been the way we have done it for ages. But what does that look like in the future if we get these new people in? What's their role? How do we integrate that? And what value do they create and what part of the value should they have, I guess? Jump straight into infrastructure. We need new infrastructure. A lot of those tanks, as much as we have a lot of tanks at the mills, we don't have those kind of tanks. So somebody needs to build them, pay for them, get them up and running. So again, who will build it? That might be some newcomers. Who will operate it? Is that the millers? We know pretty much about processing. That's certainly one of the questions which is asked. Because we heard they work well in lab, but what happens out there when it gets a little bit bigger, it might not be that easy. There's a role. Again, this will also determine the sharing of the value created. Government policy support, basically, we see it twofold. It is getting us off the ground. There is nothing wrong with getting a good grant to get us off the ground. If that's what it takes to get the lift off, happy to. But ultimately, it has to be a sustainable business model going forward. We cannot live off grants. We don't live off grants either. That's not our tradition, and it should not become. So we can build that, and we can build a resilient supply chain and a valuable one, certainly. But for that, we need the heavy investments. The heavy investments will need certainty. So again, the twofold side of the policy is we need firm policy. We need to be sure of what we have or what we don't have, either or. So there is a number of things that we have to do. And like I said, none of these will do together. Not the millers, not the growers, not the newcomers, whatever they are, whoever they are, but we have to operate that together. And I guess the real challenge, and especially in this forum today, is it's not a surprise. All this has to happen under the umbrella of what we typically call license to operate, or meeting consumer expectations. Because really, if we talk, for instance, fuel or plastics, what does it really matter to replace a fossil variant of that if we at the same time have a huge, for instance, environmental impact, the way we do that? So definitely there is an expectation. So it's very much about addressing consumer concern, and I think globally that is very important to understand. Again, even if we look today, yes, we sell into Australia and say, well, does the Australian public really care? Yeah, first of all, they do. So let's just get that. I'll get to that as well. But certainly a big part of what we produce today and what we will be producing in the future is going outside Australia. And it definitely matters. It matters to consumers. A lot of these things have mattered for many years, but it hasn't really taken off. These numbers on all the leaves, that was the growth of, or that was the number of people in these populations where they year on year back in 17 just raised their concern about climate, what's happening to the planet. It's a long time ago, and that's way before COVID. But before COVID, we were all very focused on a young Swedish girl starting a sit-down and the whole global youth speaking at the UN, and everything was about climate change and protests. So it did certainly have a momentum. Then COVID happened. Yes, we got busy with, or actually not busy, but we certainly got distracted for a while during those COVID years. So when we check this, the 26% Australia, that's recent. So now, while after COVID came war, electricity crisis, transportation issues, overall cost of living, I guess that's all what we're battling. But what we're seeing now is that this is coming back. So the concern, the focus, and thereby also the willingness to take that maybe harder way to work if you have to charge your EV for 20 minutes or 15 minutes and not just fuel it for 3.5 minutes at the local gas station. Consumers seem to be more and more willing to take that hard yard or do that hard yard. So if this is a pause, that would be my first thought or question to us all. If there is like a pause now before the world really picks up on this, is that the chance for us to get in front? Because once the world goes crazy, consumers go crazy and say, we don't want that, we want this, it's just very hard to catch up. Let's face it. Yes, we've been here for 150 years. We can prove, we have proven to ourselves decades on that we keep changing, because or else we wouldn't be here, I'm pretty sure. But we may also not be changing that fast that consumer sentiment can change. So, just a little food for thought. Is this now where we have to get in front? Looking a little bit closer to the Australian consumer sentiment, the ASMC and cane growers fielded a survey, a so-called sentiment survey, back in 2022. Just called out here, and where we just asked this was one of the questions was, what do you as consumers actually want the sugar? I think it says the raw sugar industry to focus on. What do you want us to focus on? When are we like good in your eyes? And we start from the left there. The first one is an easy one. It's just pick it up and run with it. It's renewable electricity. You know, the sugar industry should do much more renewable electricity. Well, happy to, I guess. Overall, we do it today. We know how it works. We know when it doesn't work. So certainly, pretty tangible. We can work on the outcomes of that one. It's nice to hear, to be quite honest, because sometimes you feel that the solar seems to be that everything what people have on their minds. We are the ones who can run 24/7, right? If there's no sun, we'll still be running. If there's no wind, we'll still be running. So it actually has something. We are not a power plant, but we certainly can deliver some base load. So it's a good one. The second one is about labeling. It reads, do more. Oh, what does it say? Support clearer labeling about sugar in food products or final products. Well, maybe that's also half an easy one. We're just one step away. If we talk raw sugar, we're a little bit away from those consumer products, but nevertheless, that is a concern to consumers. They would like to know what they eat. And it goes in also with the climate impact. They want to know where does it come from and what has its impact been by producing it. The third one, that's a very tough topic, but again, I'm speaking to the right people. It's all about environment. It's about reef. Here it's a specific, it's an Australian, so it's an Australian call out for the Great Barrier Reef. Do more to mitigate any water exiting to the reef. Fair enough, I guess. There's a lot of things going on in that space, but it just shows, again, environmental is key. There are a couple of other boxes in there. If we just jump to the right, also to look at the opportunities, is actually establish stronger ties with the local community, organize initiatives and events for the local community. So there's a clear desire expressed from our consumers that they want to be engaged with. That's the opportunity, that we actually engage with them. These forums are great, but we can also easily end up talking to each other and just about in a little closed circle. I guess the biggest challenge we face is this number. In the same survey, 63% who have just answered these questions openly admit or state that they have absolutely, maybe absolutely is my wording, but they do not know about the impact that our industry has on the environment. So now it's very easy for us to lean back and say, seriously, why take these statements with any value, because they all already openly admitted they do not know. I think that's a wrong approach. That's again an opening for us to educate them. There is a view out there and we can turn our back on it and they will go their way and they will buy whatever they buy and we will sell maybe whatever we can sell. That's really the thing. Let's look at the positive. The 37% who said they do know something, the majority of them are young Queenslanders. So we actually got the right people right there on our doorstep that we can engage with. Funny enough, the one slide called the how-to is the shortest one. And I guess that's because there are a lot of questions and opportunities and less answers. But I guess to a large extent, this is a classic fight between fact and emotions. Again, I feel a little bit like, preaching to the converted in this room, because I think Catalyst with 15 years has proven that there is a lot of good going on. And there is a lot of belief in doing the right stuff. But this room is not the whole industry. It's also not the millers, let's face it. So speaking on behalf of my members as well. So we have to take that one off. So there are facts, but there are also emotions, there are beliefs. There's even the liberty, apparently, to have an opinion on something, admittedly saying, but I actually don't know. That's pretty tough. So we need to educate ourselves on how we can improve. That's things like Catalyst, and how we can keep on improving. But we also need to educate others on what we already have done and what steps we are taking going forward. That will certainly require dialogue, and true dialogue, I guess, and also accepting it. Also having a dialogue with people say, but I don't know, but I really think you are killing the reef. Well, then we have to try a new angle. Try to explain to them it's not that simple, is it? It's about transparency. I guess we have to open the books. We don't like opening books generally. I don't think growers generally do. I don't think millers generally like to. But I do believe that we need to be able to prove to the outside world what is it we are doing. We have nothing to hide. Might not everything we do is perfect today, but what's the pathway going forward to make it better? We talk a lot about rules, mentioned government before. Clearly, they will not give us those frame conditions that we can grow these industries, these new opportunities, without coming with some sort of, call it restrictions or requirements on us. That might not be so bad. I mean, ultimately, when the rules are there, we need to comply. We all know that. But the good thing about that, it will carry a very, very high degree of credibility. Not necessarily because you think that the science behind the rule is very, very solid, but let's face it, if you comply with Australian law, that's a tick. That's a tick to many of our customers, will certainly be a tick to their consumers as well, saying we are compliant. So really, I think it's about being, maybe you should be a little bit more proactive and less reactive. We have a lot of good stories to tell. I still meet people, believe it or not, who says, really, all that, that's a Google search and you find these numbers that I showed about growing consumer concern. We're all consumers, by the way. Asia needs 10 million tons of sugar a year. In Australia, we produce 4. We even take some of it for our own needs. So really, do we really need to change? We'll always find customers up in Asia who will take our sugar even as is. I think that's wrong. I just think it's wrong. And we could potentially, maybe you have already asked one of the sponsors of this forum how they look at this. I'm pretty sure, knowing them from our business, their view is a little bit more ambitious than just saying, nah, that's okay, we'll live with it. So again, why not show what we do? And even so, and what we do better than others. It's a global market space out there. I dare say that there will be producers around the globe where today, when we just sell them sugar, for instance, everything is just down to the technical spec. And seriously, it's not that hard to produce sugar. It's not. It's consistency, yes, okay. It's also not hard to produce consistent, good quality of sugar. I'm sure they can do that as well. But it's all the rest of it. How do we do it? So if we are better than others, let's get it out there. And that's why benchmarking all of a sudden is an interesting tool. Let's join it, whether that's Bonsucro, SBTI, sugar-based, science-based, not sugar-based, science-based targets initiative, or anything else, Smart Cane BMP. Let's get it up there. Let's show to people this is actually what we can deliver. So a little bit like, I'll show you my credentials, what are yours? Let's get that to be the topic in the market space. So after all, we need to have consumer acceptance. Must be reached. Maybe we have it today, but we can certainly not afford to lose it. Consumer is key. After all, it's the only place where, last time I checked, that money enters into our value chain. It's really their dollar that all of us, we take a part of all the way through. So if that money doesn't come in, I don't know where it comes from. So we need to keep that. Yeah, I'm good for time. Okay, this is the last slide. So just to sum it up, that's the wording out of the Sugar Plus roadmap. Vibrant, transforming industry, sustainably producing sugar and bioproducts at the heart of regional communities. It's a long sentence. There are also a lot of people and a lot of thinking going into it, I tell you. But it's actually not too bad. It really builds on all the strengths that we have. The question is, what will we make of it? There we go. So we need to embrace the new technologies. We need to invite other people into our value chain. That also means it's not about just saying, you can build next to Racecourse Mill, as we heard, as talks about. We'll see about that, I guess. But what does invite them into our value chain really mean? How do we integrate? How do we create synergies? That's what we need to do. Sustainability, ESG, so not just maybe the circular economy or the climate impact, but also ESG, so the environmental, social, and governance part of it more broadly will play a role, and an increasing role. and ultimately our ability and willingness to engage and communicate with consumers will be key. That's the view. So guess the question is, what role can? It's pretty clear, but what role will we want to play towards 2030 and beyond? And I think the answer is up to ourselves, because we got all the tools. It's just a matter of, do we want to apply them? My 2 cents on the topic. Thank you. Yeah, sure.
All right, let's open it up. I'm sure there's a few questions out there for Yannick. All right, one at the back there. See the old sheepdog again. Sorry, you guys. Squeeze through. Thanks, mate. Legend. I think my wife's right. I think I do need a diet.
Yannick.
Hey, Tony.
Carbon seems to be the flavour of the moment. How do you see carbon as an effect on the milling sector?
Carbon in this, when you say flavor, yes, I guess there are 2 sides to it. There's the carbon as the building block, to speak like Mayor Williamson. Basically, so the sucrose, right? I guess that's what we're saying. You can produce a lot from that. But the other side of your question is definitely the milling sector. Again, I'm out of a European sugar producer as well. So we have 3 mills here. We have 13 in Europe. All those in Europe, they don't run on bagasse. They run on fossil fuel. Most of them on gas. Yes, that's the best version of fossil fuel nearly. But it's still fossil fuel. And I think we here in Australia have been using that and saying, well, the bagasse, it gives us a great, great green footprint, way better than other parts of the world. But again, it's continuous improvement. So when we talk carbon, we also have emissions. Yes, our CO2 emission as a miller looks good when we integrate with our deer king growers. Nice balance, pretty okay. But if we just look at the milling side of it, I mean, all that white thing is not just steam, all of it coming up, right? So we have some emissions that I believe we have to look at.
I believe we're sending carbon into the mill. Are we going to get paid for it?
Well, I think you get paid for it today, don't you? I think the challenge, and maybe, but I'm happy to run 3 slides back, because I think this is the critical one. And I guess what we just have to, first of all, we have to watch out that we don't lose focus of what we do today. The second thing is, even the cauldrons of this world, regardless of whether now it be the miller, clipping the ticket, or it'll be the grower, I don't think Cauldron will come to Mackay with the ambition to pay double price for their sugar, even if they turn it into something profitable. I mean, that would be a lousy business case. I think we're kidding ourselves if we think that somebody's coming with a pot of gold and dropping in our lap, and then we can fight about it. Absolutely, happy to. Anybody who knows me know I'll happily take that fight on. But they will not do that. There's a lot of risk. I think we think it's a great opportunity for diversification, which is great. It's just like having more than one customer. If you only have one customer, well, you're pretty much a price taker before you know of it. But if you have 20, well, then it's a different matter. So if we now can start, we don't want to stop producing sugar. But if some of that sugar, goes abroad to Asia as raw sugar, we know it. Some of it goes next door to the refineries here in Australia, ends up with Australian consumers. Some of that sugar goes into the likes of the Cauldron, who convert it in their nice tanks and make protein out of it. Some of the sugar ends up being fuel for aviation. All of a sudden, some of our bagasse, we won't turn off our cogeneration. Why should we? We've put the dollars down. There's a great business there. But all of a sudden, if you have a day where you can choose whether your bagasse goes to second generation bioethanol for sustainable aviation fuel, or you generate power which goes on the grid, well, again, at least in principle, in theory, you could say you can choose, maybe not from one day to the other, which one, where will you divert your gas? But certainly you have some opportunity. And I guess that's where we really create the value, Tony. But you're right, there is also a conversation to be had, who gets the money? If there is more money, who gets it? I would say the one who carries the risk. If we carry the risk, we'll take a payment for that risk. If the grower carries the risk for maybe growing a bigger crop or a different variety of crop, more fiber, less CCS, I don't know what's needed. Definitely there should be a payment for that risk if there's a risk associated with it. Yep, sure.
Yeah, good day. My name's Trevor Crook from RCS. Thanks for your presentation. My question is really about this conflict between the industrial process and the agricultural process. And a lot of new technologies generally require lots of capital and therefore scale. And then this morning we've talked about biodiversity in our soils and building up the capacity and perhaps even the carbon. There might be more money in carbon in our soils than there is fighting over it, who shares that in the mill. How do you see that working? Because it's not, in some ways we've been in conflict as an industry. You know, every paddock that's not growing cane is actually not working for the team, and yet that's sometimes needed for our soils and our future production.
Yeah, well, that's a tricky one. If I can just say, this next comment will certainly not be on behalf of the ASMC, just because I'm not sure that all my members see it this way. But let me share my two cents on that. I'm out of Europe. Beet is grown in rotation. Anybody who knows anything about beet growing say you don't grow beet back to back on the same plot, right? So we're a very, very big believer in crop rotation. So personally, this is one of the things that we brought with us certainly as a thinking. We said when we got here in 2019, we would like to see more intercropping, whatever that looks like. I'm not an agronomist. I'm sure there's a lot of knowledgeable people. We do like that. But you're right, of course, it takes out the some space. I guess the solution to that is yield. A big part of that solution is yield. And of course expansion, but what do you call it? Vertical expansion is nevertheless the most profitable one than horizontal. So I guess that's the trade-off. But again, it's not, like you say, it's soil improvement, which normally will render you a more healthy crop in the following years. So I guess I don't think we should be shy of it. And again, just have to remind ourselves, 100 years plus, it's not like we do things today like we did them 100 years ago, or how they were done 100 years ago. We just seem to forget it, because it's not revolution, it's evolution, slowly but surely. So we will also adapt around that, I'm pretty sure.
Yannick, you mentioned yield. There's been a lot of talk recently about developing new varieties. What role does that play? And who's responsible for fast-tracking that into the industry so we've got it to grow?
Well, I guess we are all responsible to a certain extent. I think we have delegated the task. So the responsibility might sit with the likes of SRA, but I guess the accountability is really with those who pay SRA to do it. So the question for me would be, are we clear enough in articulating what we would like to have and under what conditions? Because you can fast track today. Not quite sure that those techniques are legal in Australia. But more so, I'm not even sure that the global consumer will appreciate them. This is certainly a debate we also have had in Europe. This is about Australia, but again, the lessons learned out of Europe, GM, beet, forget about it. Absolutely no consumer uptake. And you can talk until you're blue in the face about that the sugar crystal has absolutely nothing modified into it. Consumers will not touch it. It's just not going. So that's the fact and the emotion again. So I guess it's also for us to decide how quick do we accept, when do we want new varieties, what do we want, and how quick do we want them? And what is the risk by speeding that up? Maybe they can speed it up in conventional breeding, but maybe then there's the more often there's one which goes totally astray. Well, and we can easily sit here now and say, yeah, we can accept that risk until we have it on farm, I'm sure, or until we lose 200,000 tons into the mill because that was a variety which should never have got through. So I guess, again, everything can be done. It's just a matter of what is the most important for us. Varieties do play a role, absolutely.
Does anyone else have a question before we conclude? Oh, there we go.
Just in the middle.
Tony, I'll let you do that. You're slimmer than me.
God, I want that in writing.
Hello. Hey. I was just curious about, you mentioned earlier as to why Europe went from bioenergies into electricity, and what was the influence for that change? Why did they do that?
I actually do not know. I think the problem is just, and this is non-academic answer, if I may put it like that. Back in 2011, prices went like this. Everything was good and great, and we did a lot of ethanol, and that stopped overnight because we ended up in the fuel for food discussion. So again, you see this big picture of a big Audi on the Autobahn in Germany. It's a little bit like the pub test, and then you have the starving kid in Africa. That was the kind of conflict that we saw. So that put a lot of effort into second generation bioethanol, or effort into creating that. And so far it has not really had that commercial breakthrough. And I think personally, that has been one of the reasons why politicians have said, ethanol, it just takes too long, it's just too complicated. So we go EV. And again, then look at what the industry does, right? I mean, you have a lot of European producers. We have a lot of solar and wind and this and that. That comes then with a whole different other conflicts of who is going to be neighbor to the windmills and to the solar panels and so on. Because it's a little bit more crowded in Europe than Australia.
Very much.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a last-minute question? Oh, that's not far to travel. By the way, I've heard a lot of questions about carbon. We have an expert this afternoon in our panel, Dr. David Rawlings, or Professor David Rawlings, who's here to talk about carbon and natural capital. So there will be a lot more information about that this afternoon if you're here. There he is.
Just one final question. You talked about the consumers not accepting the GM-modified sugar. It baffles me that it's unacceptable. I think it's inevitable that that's the only way we can go to improve how we're going to feed the people in the world is going to be from GM. Do you think we're underselling ourselves in that space?
Well, like I said, I think it's fact and emotions up against each other. We do have GM beet. So even the beet, the same sugar beet is used in the US as a GM variety. They seem to be more relaxed about that. A lot of the soybeans in the world is GM. So people seem to be more relaxed. A lot of the pharmaceuticals that we inject into ourselves, or people inject into ourselves, are actually based on GM modified yeasts. So it is there. So it's this thing, but as soon as it gets up there, it gets on the shelf, it's a 1 kilo pack of CSR brand, and now it's GM. And you said it. You said GM modified sugar, but again, it's actually the plant. The sugar itself has absolutely no trace of it. So I understand it, and trust me, can even turn from being just baffled to be frustrated, because you just feel that this is one thing. The way that Europe dealt with it was a lot of good breeding. Sugar beet is not the biggest crop for the big companies who do all other sorts of seeds, but they do take a keen interest because they get a good margin, because beet growers are generally happy to pay, because for 10, 15 years, more or less unbroken, we got 1.5 to 2% yield increase each and every year. If you do that as a farmer, you're also willing to pay for the best product coming out next year, the next variety, right? So they were able to drive that a lot, so that really helped yields lift a lot. Yes, 80% of that yield increase in that period we can attribute to breeding, the rest to good farming practice change and so on. That seems to have stopped. So I guess the challenge is now, what next? How do we keep on growing? Maybe GM does come back, but it just doesn't seem like consumers are quite there yet.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure it's been a very, very thought-provoking presentation. Please thank Yannick very much for us, please.
Thank you.
Thanks so very much. Fantastic. All right, so what's going to happen? It's lunchtime, people. Come on, who's hungry? Come on, be honest. Where are the hands? Yeah, there, of course you are. All right, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be breaking from this room, okay? You can leave your things on the table. Just be aware that we're all leaving the room and that it will be divided in half when we get back. So when you come back, we want you all back in this room, but it's going to be your